you know me, Jon Fuller, right? And I've been involved doing Tell the Truth style campaigning for donkey's years. If I'm giving a talk in a group, I'll invariably kick off with, you do not live in a functioning democracy if crucial news is withheld from you that will determine the way you vote and the demands you make of politicians. I'm going to argue now that we don't live in a functioning democracy, and I'm going to prove it to you. And that's how I usually start my Tell the Truth talk. It's a cut down version. You know where I'm coming from. So, thanks to Zoe, I got to help get that kind of message out into Toxic News covering climate change book, and I give regular talks. I gave, before the JSO, the raid was done on JSO, a month before that I did my Tell the Truth talk to that group, one of Phoebe Plummer's soup notes. And it comes as a shock to people. Sometimes some of these core facts do come as a shock to people, and people who think that they're relatively well informed. I'm not going to do the full talk, but the full talk is all with references, and people get the hyperlinks and a handout. But I'm just going to give you a flavour of it. So I say that there are 5 core truths, and the first one is mass loss of life has already begun, and it's horrific. Just over 10 years ago, there was a report done for the United Nations by Dara International, and they said that 400,000 people a year were being killed by climate change. 360,000 of those people were infants under the age of 1 year, killed by the increased spread of disease in, at that point, a 1.1 degrees Celsius hotter world. Now that is a really horrific statistic. That's snuffing out lives just as they've begun. We tend to think sometimes with climate change maybe people dying older when they can't cope with extreme heat. But this is killing huge numbers of people, huge numbers of children, and the media can never bring that into the conversation. They never will. Jumping into more recent events, there was, by the end of the 6th year of failed rains in the Horn of Africa, the United Nations and Red Cross said that 150 million people were going hungry, and 100,000 people have been killed by famine. After the 2022 floods, extreme floods in Pakistan, 33 million people, it was said by the UN, have been impacted, and many of those people will never be able to return to their home. The same has happened with South Sudan, Sudan just recently, where following extreme floods, people have been displaced 1 year, the floods have hit again, and they can't go back. And people are being displaced in their millions, and they just cannot go back. So, how this translates is that in the media, you could have a discussion there about Whitehaven coal. It was on TV last night, and BBC will say, right, okay, the government's climate change targets means you've got to decarbonise, and then they'll go to 4 people in BBC News last night, 4 different people who lived in the area. It's a real shame, you know, it could have created jobs, and it's a hammer blow for the community. Now, what the BBC never does, will never do, is to say something about those 9,000 children killed today. Now, if you're out in protest action, the BBC, ITV will always put the tough questions to you. And I say that's right, that's fair, they should. You know, all the disruption you're causing, how can you justify that? Fine, we'll do the same to the polluters. If a Heathrow executive is there saying, I want to expand the airport, the BBC, ITV should be saying, so killing 1,000 children a day isn't enough for you? That's never going to happen. So the second truth is mass death, mass suffering, annihilation are locked in to a very great degree. World Meteorological Organization said that due to sea level rise, increasing extremes of flood and drought, water scarcity and food security, there will be 700 million Africans displaced by the year 2030. On the government's website, .gov.uk, the Environment Agencies warn the young they must adapt or die. That is on the .gov.uk website. Adapt or die. Now, you're not going to have that being brought into conversations on the BBC or ITV. The IPCC says that 3.3 to 3.6 billion people live in contexts highly vulnerable to climate change. Recently, the University of Graz in Western Ontario, a year ago this was, they produced a peer-reviewed paper that said that at 2 degrees Celsius of heating, 1 billion people will be killed. No, it's not reported anyway. you'll be lucky if you know, and the vast majority of people in our movement won't know. They've reviewed 180 other papers that have brought them to that conclusion. It was peer-reviewed research, and it tied in with the report from Lancet, in November 2023, which countdown report on climate change that says that billions of people will suffer ill health as a consequence of climate change. The Potsdam Institute for Climate Impacts Research, 4 degrees Celsius of heating, they've warned that half the world's population will be killed. Half the world's population cannot cope with that degree of heating. So that's the second truth, that a certain degree of extreme suffering is locked in. Third one, risk of extinction, the vast majority of media will say it's just hype, that we're exaggerating, that there's no evidence at all to support that threat of risk of extinction. Well, Professor James Hansen a year ago produced his peer-reviewed paper with a number of other scientists, and it's all about the energy imbalance, the amount of sunlight coming in, to do with cloud cover, to do with Arctic sea ice, and this immense difference in the energy imbalance. His paper argues that we are heading for 8 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius of global heating. Now, if 4 degrees kills half the world's population, that is your extinction level there. Professor James Hansen is well respected. Why is that not being covered by the media? If something could kill billions of people, that, in my opinion, should be headline news every single day until that threat has been removed. That's what a functioning press and media would do. Hansen says, oh, we're going to have to go for geoengineering. That is not a get out of free jail card. Geoengineering, spraying this stuff up into the upper atmosphere, you know, we need sunlight to grow food. If you mimic the effect of a very, very powerful volcano, we know the effects of that in Northern Europe and in UK. If you go back 1,000 years, I'll give you a peer-reviewed research which shows that there was famine in the UK. We need sunlight to grow food. So you're trying to bring temperatures down, you're reducing the amount of sunlight in the northern hemisphere, the northern part of Europe, you dramatically reduce your agricultural production. Fourth truth, 2050 is far too late. The UK has just 0.85% global population, but is responsible for 4.45% of global emissions. The UK used up its fair share of the carbon budget at least 2 decades ago, perhaps 3. So we've grabbed more than our fair share of the global carbon budget. Our nation's grabbed more, and then, get this, we're going to overspend, overdraw on our carbon budget, and the plan is that by the year 2050 we should reach net zero, and then we leave the young to pay to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere between 2050 and 2100 to remove enough carbon dioxide to stabilise temperatures at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm going to bet that virtually everybody in this room is going to say that's profoundly immoral, and we don't want that outcome. But that is what the IPCC depends on, that's what the Committee on Climate Change depends on, that's what COP21 is predicated on. And so what I do in my talks is I throw it in their faces. I throw it in the media's faces and in politicians' faces. And I say, how dare you do that to the young? How dare you do that to the youngest members of your family? The media will never tell the young what's planned for them. This is the deal. You pay for everything I dump into the atmosphere, and every politician dumps into that. You pay, and you pay after 2050, and nobody's going to tell you. It has to be kept from you, because if you knew that, you'd probably go out and sit in a row. The fifth truth is the G word. We've had a couple of references to it. A couple of our people are very reluctant to use it, but a lot of our speakers do. The G word is genocide. And I just want to, we'll have a couple of people talk a little bit more about this a bit later on. But technically that is true. That international criminal law says that you are not allowed to annihilate other nations. You're not allowed to remove them from the map. And yet that is what the policies for driving climate change, causing sea level rise, increased storms, that is what happens. Tuvalu, Vanuatu and the rest will be annihilated. The number of nations to be annihilated depends on how quickly we decarbonise. So it is a breach of international criminal law. The Rome Statute is crystal clear about that, and you have in there, in the legislation, you have these concepts of direct intent and oblique intent. And you don't have to just be wholly responsible for it yourself. Your policies only have to contribute to that outcome. That's my 9 minutes. So, I guess my key point here is that, a key point here is the TV is never going to allow any kind of discussion around people, say, perhaps being given a choice. Are you going to be given a vote on whether we just kill 1 billion people or maybe 5 billion people? Are you going to be given a vote on whether we just grab everything for ourselves and we kill everybody else that comes after us? The media is never going to ask for that. They will ask, Jim will have seen this, Don will have seen this, they will say, oh, we want a referendum on net zero, we want to cancel net zero. But the media is never asking, allowing a debate around, well, how many people are we going to actually kill? That's not going to happen. So I feel that there's a point here that kind of links with animal rebellion, but there are some things that are so painful, so difficult, we're just not going to look at it. So wrapping up on my bit, I'll just say this is a line I use a lot with the media. You've stolen from the young the one thing they needed to defend themselves: information. That's me.